Okay, so you're going to give continuation to the topic of spirit sympathy and antipathy. Um, I just want to recall a little bit what we studied last week. Today, we're going to start at question 298. That's where we stopped last week. Going to repeat. When I see the word sympathy, I think very often we associate sympathy with empathy. They're two different things. They're quite similar, but they're different. And when I went to look at the definitions in English of the word, the best one that I like, that I think it fits best what the spirits are talking about here, is the one that comes direct from the Greek. The word has a Greek origin, and it's having common feelings, common interest. A little bit different from empathy, but also empathy will be a part of that sympathy. And I think it's important to understand that we're not talking about the kind of love that would have conjugal love, filial love, or mother's or father's love. We could have those loves and still not be sympathetic, or not having it, not sharing the same feelings, not sharing the same interest. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. Also, always important to keep in mind that right in this book too, you're studying the spiritual life. How are we without a physical body? How do we behave? What do you do? What do you think? What do you dress? Do you undress? The common and the more abstract things that happens to us in the spiritual world. Now that we understand our eternal spirits, that we continue our life without the physical body, Kardec is asking the spirits, how is their life over there? And you see how the book Kardec really built blocks. We just finished the part before this that deals with relationships of spirits. Do we have relationships and those kind of things? And now we compile on top of that. What do we like or dislike one another when you are that? Since we have relationships that was already established. And things to keep in mind always is the fact that in the spiritual world we are transparent. If you're here, we can buffer our true selves. If you're here, you can pretend to be different than what we really are. Not necessarily out of evil, not necessarily out with the intention of fool someone. But as Divaldo always tells us, I cannot tell you who I am really am because you'd hate me. Right? Divaldo always says that you'd not like me. Because we like to present our best to others. It's normal, it's natural. Why should I show it to you my ugliness? You have your own, I have my own, and we deal with that. But when we talk to one another, we try to avoid the bad aspects of us. It's my understanding is almost like a charity that you do somewhere else. I'm not gonna throw all my eggs on you now. It's actually not charitable attitude, I think. But in the spiritual world, we don't have that. In the spiritual world, we're very transparent. We cannot hide ourselves. We present ourselves the way we really are, which is one of the reasons that they have those different levels, different neighborhoods, so to say, in the spiritual world, so we can associate with those well like us. We cannot fake in the spiritual world. And when you think of sympathy and antipathy, if we can fake being sympathetic to others here in the physical world, all that's not going to happen. Okay, that's our real selves, our real feelings towards someone will be right in front of us. But also it's true, and you have to keep in mind that when we free ourselves from this physical body, potentially, and the word potential is very important, we may free ourselves also from many passions that is associated with the matter, that is also associated with the flesh. And, and when we are free from all those things, we may see things, or we will see things in a different way. Our range of perception is extremely augmented, and things that are perhaps gave great value now loses its value, and though the way also may be true that things that gave nothing to it may become priorities in our spiritual existence. And I think I'm saying that to have understand that our sympathies and antipathies that we have here while in the physical world towards people may be the same that we have when we go back there, but may be different. Maybe we will see ourselves, we will see others, and we see things completely different that will redefine our sympathies, our interests, our feelings. And I think that's important to keep that in mind. And keep in mind that all of our feelings, all of our senses are extremely augmented for the good and for the bad. The love is more love, but the hate is more hate as well. Okay? And you already covered over here questions behind with Kardec, like in 292, do spirits have hatred? Right? And the answer is hate happen amongst the impure spirits. Right? So the impure spirits that carry hate over here in the good spirits world, they may continue carrying hate. Their hate will also be augmented, like everything else is augmented. Okay? If you continue to have enemies. And again, it depends on all of this book too will depend in the moral qualities of the spirit. There are spirits out there who no longer have hatred. They passed that stage already. They may not like, they may be even have antipathy towards another individual because of the feelings of that individual, but there will be no hate. On the contrary, will be compassion. It will be the desire to assist, to elevate that spirit. And again, we can start now with 298, and it starts reading and discuss it. Go ahead, Philip, please.
298. Are souls predestined to be together from inception? And do we each have our other half somewhere in the universe with whom we will be reunited one day? No. There is no destined union between two souls. Union exists between all spirits, but in varying degrees according to their ranking or their degree of perfection. The closer to perfect, the more united they are. Disharmony produces all the problems of human life, while harmony generates perfect happiness.
We could not be incomplete. Question, I think 116, in the Spirit's answer to us that we are created simple and ignorant. And the word simple over there means that you are in one unit, one single unit, like an atom is one single unit, right? We are not composed. We are not made of other things. We are simple because we are one integral thing. That is one of the meanings of simple over there. If we had halves or thirds or things, would not be simple, it would be composed, right? Would have been there is something else other than that is missing over here. And that's not the case. The spirit is integral, it creates simple and ignorant, predestined to reach spiritual perfection in its integrality. Okay. So the answer is just a plain no. Okay? There is no path, and none of us are predestined to complement another spirit. On the contrary, it's very important. It says union exists between all spirits. The path of progress from the complexity that we are right now, meaning that amongst us there is so many different tastes, so many different ideologies, so many different religions and ethnicities. All that is going to accumulate. It's going to get less and less and less as we move up to the apex of that pyramid, where resides the Christs or the pure spirits. How much difference could have been among all the Christs? They all have what they all have tremendous, although individuals, they are almost alike, each one of them. And they all have the absolute perception and understanding of God like everyone else. So much so that the Christ is allowed to say, as Jesus said, the Father and I are one, because they are in absolutely synchrony with one another. So the goal, what we're going to reach in terms of union, is to have that union between all spirits. We are far from that yet, but no one is predestined to have one specific spirit. Otherwise, there would not be that to love the universal family. There will be many subdivisions in that family, and that's not the objective. The objective is for us all to be united in one single universal family. So the more we evolve, the more we are going to have that sympathy, common goals, common interest amongst all spirits. At our level, it does not happen, right? But it is acceptable, the idea that two spirits have gone together in projects and assisting one another for multiple reincarnations. They have a tremendous degree of interest and goals and likelihood very similar towards one another. It's still two individual separated spirits that one cannot complement the other, but one can assist the other. One can provide knowledges that one has and the other does not have, and vice versa. One can be an instrument to propel the other one forward at the time the one is falling behind, and vice versa. That can happen. But it's still which one is an integral individual.
It's
And
like team, in a group, right? Like sports team.
yes,
We are all going for the same objective, but we are all individual players.
that's right. And each one has one style. One is better at this, and one is better at that. And all together, they are codependent as a team. They depend on one another. But each one that is one individual. And all together, we will make that team better if they have that sympathy amongst them. That's very important as well. Okay, any questions here?
299.
Yes.
In what sense should we interpret the term half, sometimes used by spirits when referring to sympathetic spirits? That expression is inaccurate. If one spirit were half of another, it would be incomplete when separated from its other half.
One of the things that we always remind ourselves here, and we have to remind ourselves that just because things come from the spiritual world, just because the spirit said, doesn't mean that it's right, doesn't mean that it's true, doesn't mean that it's correct. The spirits in the spiritual world may be as eloquent, as intelligent as we are, or perhaps less. We are right now, we doing the studies here, in the position of teach and assist many spirits in the spiritual world right now, who knows a lot less than us. The idea of everything that comes from the spiritual world is, have to give it validity just because it comes from the spiritual world is a big problem that we need to erase. And Kardec worked very hard to do that. So the expression is not right. The idea comes mostly from Romanticism. Mostly from conjugal relationships. That's when it always started. That I need her to complement me, and I need him to complement me. Without him, I am missing a piece of myself. That's what this whole thing starts. But it stays here at the level of human passions. Comments, questions? 300 then?
300.
Please.
When two perfectly sympathetic spirits are reunited, do they remain united for all eternity, or can they separate and unite with other spirits? All spirits who have reached perfection are united. In all other worlds, when a spirit ascends from a lower world to a higher one, it does not always feel the same sympathy for those it has left behind.
So there is, to begin with, a problem with the question here, right? When two perfectly sympathetic spirits are reunited, how can you expect perfection from fallible beings like we are? How can you perfectibility for individuals who are so imperfect as we are right now? So to begin with, that would not be possible. And of course, I'm speaking of spirits at our level. I'm not speaking at the level of the Christs yet, right? That we have no idea how that word is. Okay? And all spirits who have reached perfection are united. Again, that's among the Christs. That's the very apex of that pyramid. For those that have reached that top over there, we are at the bottom of it yet. Okay, or pretty close to the bottom yet. Far from it. So outside of those who reach perfection, that perfectibility will not exist, especially for the spirits at our level. Now, let's assume here that one of us, that I have tremendous sympathy with a colleague. Could be my wife, could be a colleague of work, could be anyone. And we are doing projects together, quite a few reincarnations already, being family members or being boss and subordinate, and in many relationships, many different relationships, but always cooperating with one another in our projects. Okay. And let's assume that one of the spirits, I say my wife, move ahead, morally speaking, work a little harder than I, and now she gained the opportunity to go to a higher spirit world, and I stay behind. She's not going to forget me. She's not going to start to dislike me, but that sympathy will change. Because again, if you go back to the definition, that's why I like the definition, is having common interest. Someone who is in one word, different word, will have different interest. It's absolutely natural, right? I can give one example of myself. I was thinking when I was reading this question. Growing up, I had a friend that was, we were together all the time, a very good friend. One day I would eat in his house, then they would eat in my house, we go camping together, we did everything together. Tremendous amount of things. We went to school quite a few years together, did homework together, almost everything we did together. At one point on his life, he started to experience with drugs, with marijuana. And I continued trying to keep the same friendship with him. And one point he told me that that kind of friendship would not be possible because our interests have changed so much. What he was looking for, what he was putting his energy now have diverted a lot from the way he was before. I was still the same. Continue to love the guy, great person, have committed no crime besides using illegal drugs. We can call it a crime. At that time, it was a crime. That's another thing. He had to always be hiding from the cops and this and that. Our interests changed completely. There was no hate. There was no dislike. There was no fight. There was absolutely nothing. But he now is almost like he is living in another world. And it is, if you think, someone who is in a world of drugs, who is always seeking to get drugs and this and that, that gives priority to their drugs, to the other things, lives a different world than the ones who are not in that world doing drugs. So our relationship was completely different. We couldn't keep the same kind of relationship because now we are not longer sympathetic because our interest is different. The love is still there, the likelihood is still there, it's still a great guy, but made the choice that make things different from us. If in this world, in the physical life, this happens, can you just imagine someone living in different levels of existence in the spiritual world? It will be completely different. So that will happen. But again, as we say in our leadership meetings with spirits, every relationship that is based, we have the foundations on true love, not on passions, not on looks, not on social status, none of those things that are just as eternal as we are. There may be necessary separations, there may be times that each one of us is going to have to deal with issues that we need to do on our own or without that individual. But if those relationships are based in true love, eventually they will be reunited. If you see in an example of Andre Louis and his mother was living in worlds much, much elevated, came to assist him, came to be with him, but they have different interests. With her relationship with the one who was her husband and the lovers of their husband was there also, but they have completely different interests. So you cannot say that they are necessarily sympathetic. They may love one another, but they're not sympathetic. We use the definition that I brought here, and that's why I brought that definition. was to use the word sympathy in a more objective way. Any question, comments? And keep in mind this question, because I think I'm going to come back to it for the other questions as well.
301.
Please.
When two spirits are completely like-minded, do they complement one another, or is this sympathy the consequence of their perfect identity of character? The sympathy attracting one spirit to another is the result of the perfect harmony of their predispositions and instincts. If one were needed to complete the other, individuality would be lost.
So you see here Kardec's trying to insist in this idea of twin souls, of spirits complementing one another, right? He insists, you want to be very clear on that. So when two spirits are completely like-minded, do they complement one another? Or is this sympathy the consequence of their perfect identity of character? Kardec really is pushing to make sure that this idea of soulmates or half spirit is completely eliminated by the spirits. And the sympathy attract one spirit to another is the result of perfect harmony of the predisposition and instincts. And then we go back to the definition that we had. Have common interest. Have a common objectives. Like things, have similar kind of feelings toward things. And it's interesting that spirits who have that degree of sympathy are so sympathetic, they could not complement one another because they have exactly what the other have. So in order to complement one another, you don't have to bring what I don't have. Then you would complement me, right? So perhaps the complement, if we need the complement, would be something else to add to what I already have, right? So we have that perfect harmony of our predisposition instincts, so like things alike. Like with my friend and I, if I have joined him in the pursuit of smoking pot, perhaps we'd continue with our perfect harmony. But the perfect harmony was broken by this third element that was a drug in that case. Any question? You have to keep in mind that the idea of individuality, we are individuals. We are integral, completed being, imperfect, ignorant, simple, but still integral being, 100%. There is nothing missing to make us 100%. There is no 50% of us that have to find the other 50% somewhere else. That does not exist. No questions? 302, just a minute. Yeah.
302. Does a similarity of thoughts and ideas constitute perfect sympathy? Or is the uniformity of knowledge also required? Perfect sympathy results from having an equal degree of elevation.
Okay, which would be very difficult to achieve in a world where we live, where things are so dispersed, right? We have spirits of many different levels of evolution amongst us. Now, keep in mind that perfect sympathy does not mean a high moral elevation as well. Because again, if my friend and if I have joined my friend in seeking drugs, would perhaps would have perfect sympathy. And of course, I think the word perfect here as a word that doesn't fit, because we are not perfect, therefore cannot perform anything and not build anything that's perfect. But as close to perfect it could be. It could be the tremendous degree of sympathy, right? But towards something that's not so good, right? And of course, we're going to differentiate from the Christs, where they have reached a level in which they are free from all the vices. They are free from all the passions, and they have acquired all the virtues. So if you reach those three things, you need to be sympathetic to those because you have everything in common now. You have no vices. You have no passions. You're completely free from any materiality. You have a complete understanding, perception, and communicability with God. You see one, you see the next, basically. And it's still these are individuals. It's still each one is one individuality. So it's very important to keep sure that you may be sympathetic towards the good and towards the bad as well. (303)
May spirits become sympathetic in the future, and even if they are not so today. Yes, they all eventually will. A spirit who is currently in a lower sphere will advance to join another spirit in a higher world. Their reunion will occur sooner if the higher spirit fails any of its trials and remains stationary. Can two currently sympathetic spirits cease to be so? Absolutely, if one of them is lazy.
Okay. So the law of progress, right? The law is for us to climb up on that pyramid and reach that apex where the Christ reside. As we're moving up in that pyramid, we are shading off our prejudices, we are shading off our vices, we are shading off our passions. And as we do that, we become more and more and more alike, and become more and more have similarity of feelings and similarity of interest. So eventually, we will all be sympathetic because we all gonna have common feelings. You all have the commonality of interest, and that makes us sympathetic. So eventually, we all gonna reach that sympathy in the universal human race, so to say. We're not gonna be humans anymore, I imagine, when we reach that level, we're not even be humans anymore. Now, can you correct sympathetic spirits to do so? Absolutely, if one of them is lazy. Again, going back to the same example that I use with someone who's very sympathetic to myself now. I choose to not work hard, become a little bit lazy, and my companion, the one sympathetic to me, does not continue to work hard and reach higher level of existence. So now they're gonna have different common interests because I still carry the vices that that individual had lost. I still carry the prejudices that other person have shed off. So we're going to have a incompatibility of feelings and interest. And then, so therefore, our sympathy may cease to exist. Again, the sympathy. You may continue to love, you may continue to care, you may continue to like, but the commonality of feelings of interest is no longer there. No questions? No comments? Because my explanation is so good, right? So now Kardec has his own saying in the theory of soulmates.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
The theory of soulmates is merely a figurative representation of the union of two sympathetic spirits and should not be taken literally. Spirits using this expression do not belong to the higher orders. Hindered by their narrow range of ideas, they have expressed their thoughts using terms that they employ during their physical lives. We must disregard this idea of two spirits created for each other, who must someday be inevitably reunited in eternity after having remained separated for a more or less long period of time.
Okay, so I think what Kardec does is summarize everything that is said, everything that is said here. Reinforce the point of view that just because they do not have a physical body doesn't make them any smarter than someone else. Just because they do not have a physical body means that whatever they say is the truth. And as I said before, the idea of soulmate, the idea of one complement the other, it's things that we built out of conjugal relationships. That husband and wife, they need one another, they complement one another. One cannot live without the other. When one dies, 6 months later, the one that goes behind. It happens very often. So they build this illusion of this half things, which does not happen.
Talking about those soulmates stuff. I was watching a lecture another day, and they were talking about more like in a sense that when we plan our reincarnation, we have in our planning, like I'm gonna get married with someone A, and I come here, and then I ended up getting married with someone B. It does not mean that B is not my soul, between quotes, soulmate, because my plan was A and not B. It's just like I had a kind of my path was diverted, but I ended up like at the end, if I do well with B, means that I can reach some of my planning goals, but in a different path. I don't know if that's the kind of one of the other possibilities that people say soulmates.
Yeah, I think that's a proof that we are not half of one another, right?
Yeah,
Because there is no determinism.
yeah, there's,
If was determinism, then if you are meant to be with A, if A complements you, then it would have to be A.
yeah,
But since you have free will, since life happens and things changes, maybe A decide to migrate to Russia and said, no, I'm not going to Russia. I can stand the cold weather. Going to stay in Brazil. Let's say, right? Then that plan in the spiritual world does not work.
yeah.
It doesn't mean that it could not find else, and it still fulfill at least most of the objectives for this incarnation. That in a sense disprove the idea of soulmate, right? Now, I think what you're saying is people say, oh, the plan was A, but B is my soulmate. So no matter what happens, you have to be with B. Could that be C? Could that be D? Right? But the important thing here is that you find someone with whom you'll be cooperate, right, to one another to reach the objectives of that reincarnation for both for you and for the other person as well. One of the problems is so made that in many ways was misunderstood when he used the term soulmate as well in relationship of in speaking of spirits that have reincarnated together, help one another for so many reincarnations that it's almost like every time one shows up, the other one is there also, because they have that commonality of goals and objects. But even those eventually they will have to go their own their own path, different path. Good. Now, any more questions here? Because now I'm going to change completely to the subject. We're going to deal with the memory of physical life. And keep in mind, memory of physical life, okay? Not memory of past lives right now, okay?
304.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does a spirit remember its physical life? Yes. Since a spirit has lived as a human being many times, it remembers what it has been and often laughs at the foolishness of its past. Like adults who laugh when reminiscing about the foolishness of their youth and the silliness of their childhood.
Let's try to bring some points over here. The objective of our coming to this physical world, be associated with this physical body, is to go through experiences for us to develop ourselves morally, intellectually, right? It was to learn things. If you come over here, you go through all this trouble, you go through all this process from birth to childhood to the teenagers, years, oh God, and everything else, and then we die and not remember anything. What have you gained? Or that knowledge, that thing is it's over there somewhere without our ever remember. So it doesn't make sense. So at least, the very last physical life, the spirit is very aware of it. The spirit will remember it, the spirit will use it as a tool, and that remembers as a tool to say, oh, this was good, this was not so good, this I could have done better. Now that I'm back in the spiritual world, I see that that was really foolish what I did over there. Because that's how you're going to learn. That's how you gotta acquire enough knowledge if you remember those things. And just like Kardec puts it here, adults laugh when reminiscing about the foolishness of their youth and the silliness of the childhood. It's a good chance that we'll do the same thing when we go to the spiritual world and again remember again when we get over there. A lot of things that was that important for us loses importance. Okay, so maybe I have a quarrel with my neighbor where the fence between your property should be. Should be a little bit towards this side or towards that side, then we have a quarrel and I hate him and he hates me and I steal his cattle and he steal my dogs and then go there. And then we go back to spiritual and look back and say, what the holiness? That the land is there. We have none of that anymore. That little fence it makes no sense anymore. Now it's laughable. But when we were there, that half a meter to the right, to the left was enough to create so much distress, so much waste of energy of those two individuals. We may go together back there, look back and laugh at it. If we are able to disconnect with ourselves, if we are able to be, what is the word, detached of materiality. Because as going to see over here, the spirits were extremely attached to material things, may still be attached to that piece of land, may still be attached to that fence, and it still wants to continue fighting over that fence, which happens as well. But the spirits, not elevated spirits, even backward spirit like ourselves, it may get over there and say, wow, that was really foolish what I was doing. You don't have to be very elevated morally to get to that conclusion. But if, unfortunately, will be those who will be extremely attached, yeah, to material things, and we perpetuate that suffering and that hate. Comments, questions, comments? Okay, 305.
One second. Holy smokes. Got a message coming in from another phone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Question 305. Do spirits spontaneously recover memory of their physical life immediately after death? No. It comes back to them little by little, like objects gradually becoming visible out of a fog once they focus on it.
We need to be careful with words like spontaneously, immediately. Those are words that when you see those, you already put a red flag to those words, right? We know that once we discarnate, first we die, then we discarnate, we go to a period of good perturbation, right? It's almost like like this, let's call it a hibernation that spirit goes through, right? Being born is extremely painful, requires the greatest pain that a human being suffers is the moment of birth, when you have to inflate that lung for the first time and those ribs have to dilate for the first time. Going back to the spiritual world requires adjustment as well. Going back to the spiritual world, that lives behind this dense body, and now not requiring the physical senses, not require the electrochemical activities of the brain, require a degree of adjustment as well. So spirit may not remember everything. We have cases in the mediumship meetings that we ask the spirit the name, and the spirit cannot even remember their names. It takes time. It takes some time to readjust yourself in that spiritual world. The same way it takes time for the spirit to readjust itself with this new physical body at the moment of reincarnation. But eventually, as the spiritual world, the fog dissipates slowly and things start to make sense and start to make sense of things. For us who have a good understanding of our spiritual nature, of us being spiritual beings, that will continue to exist when the physical body dies, we will go to that perturbation. We still need that period of readjustment. Likely it will be easier, faster than someone who does not have this knowledge that we have. But even us, we'll go to a period. The spirit who goes the process of discarnation slowly due to chronic illness or very old age, and is kind of dying slowly, and the same process, the disconnection of all those connectors between the perispirit and the physical body is losing and losing, may have it a little bit easier, and will have a little bit easier. Someone, let's say, that is a health athletic, 25 years old, who have an accident and die immediately over there. When that perispirit is so dense connected with that physical body, that period of perturbation perhaps will be even longer. But eventually both will have the fog dissipate and come to the realization of their continue existing in the spiritual world, and eventually remember that at least that past physical life. Some spirits are received over here, they are not able to remember the cause of death. Some others are able to tell us. It was a disease, or was an accident, or was very often, fortunately, um, a violent death. With time, they're able to remember. Sometimes during the conversation, they start to remember things, which can be very traumatic for them. But all of us will have that period of perturbation. The more you know, the better, of course, it is. We can do one more, and then we stop.
306. Does a spirit remember every detail of its life? Can it grasp its entire life at a single retrospective glance? Depending on the influence things have had on its state as a spirit, it remembers them more or less clearly. However, we should understand there are many trivial things in its life of no importance. As such, the spirit does not even try to remember them. Could it remember them if it wanted to remember? It could recall the most obscure details of every instant of its life, even of its thoughts. However, a spirit will not choose to do this if it does not fulfill a useful purpose. Does it understand the purpose of its physical life in relation to the future life? Of course. It sees it and understands it better than when incarnated in the living. It understands the need for purification to reach God, and it knows that some of its impurities are shed in each existence.
These people remember in order of priorities, in order of importance. Not much different from us now, right? Probably it depends on the culture. Most women remember their 15th, 16th birthday because it's something meaningful. People, it's bad. That's different. But they will guys, you will remember the 18th, or perhaps the 21 now, because they can drink in a bar. So remember those birthdays. If I ask, what about your 19th birthdays? What about the 20th birthday? Unless something happened of importance on those dates, probably don't remember. But those major dates, probably remember. If I ask you, where were you, what you were doing on November 30th, 2000, probably remember. But if I ask you, what do you remember, where were you on the day of the 9/11? I'm sure you remember. I'm sure you can tell where you were, how you got the news, what did you do right after, who do you talk to? Probably can remember things in great degree of details because it's meaningful, because it's important. As a spirit, we have in our memory file everything, every breath that you took, you know. But do you get to know about every breath that you took? But if you want that one episode in which you drowned and you spend a couple of minutes out of water, and then when you come up and took that breath, probably remember that day. Remember that breath. Probably remember because it's significant. But ever the breath that we do, something from 10 to 16 breaths per minute, most people not remember, even know that you're breathing. Right? But if it's significant, if it means something to you, probably remember. The same thing with the spirit. The experience was significant, they remember. Then on A, could it remember them if it wanted to remember? Well, if it wanted to remember, it's because it's important. It's because it means something to it, then it will remember. It may remember in details, right? Now, does it understand the purpose of physical life in relation with future life? Ideally, yes. Ideally, as you live here, go back to the spiritual world, get together with your spiritual guide, get together with loved ones, and you have more clarity of the importance of this physical existence. Is that the same for everyone? No, it's the same potential for everyone. There are those who you hate the idea of continuing to exist in the spiritual world. You hate the idea of eternal life. The suiciders over there, if they could commit suicide in the spiritual world again, they would do it. So it varies on the degree of elevation of each one, but in general, as a potential, everyone understands. And that was one of the greatest reasons why people, spirits, seek reincarnation. That it's said in spiritual world, we keep it begging the opportunity to come back, because we understand the importance of it, that it's here that we progress. We may learn everywhere else, but it's here that we progress. I don't know what that is. Okay, I think we'll stop here. Any questions? It's 8 o'clock already. Next week, continue at 3:07. Carol, can you make the final prayer?
Sure. Thank you very much, Elmo. And thank you, Philip, for reading this evening, and everyone who is participating this evening. Infinite Creator and Divine Providence, we give thanks to be together again as brothers and sisters for our study of the Spirit's book. We're on Book 2, Chapter 6, Spirit, Sympathy, and Antipathy, Soulmates, and the Memory of Physical Life. Sympathy involves common interests and can also encompass empathy as well. We continue with our sentiments as imperfect spirits into the spiritual world. There can be affinity and assistance among souls, but there is no total predestined union between two souls known as soul mates. Soul mates are not literal, but merely figurative. All perfected spirits are united. An individual evolves on their own unique timeline and progresses through various interests. A spirit remembers physical life, but not directly after death, nor all the details, because an adjustment is required, and it takes time during this transition for chaos and fog to lift and the impurities to be shed. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us this evening. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us and for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, the mediums, the workers, and all participants. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all Spiritus centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. May we go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service and charity, which is love in action. May peace